Welcome to G-Man Gaming and Reviews. So today I thought I would do a video that's a react video to a video by Metatron called Dragon Age the Vanguard is a Disaster and That's the Truth. The reason I wanted to do a react to this video is I have been playing through Dragon Guard the Vanguard myself, right? I've been playing through with it quite a bit, but I haven't really gotten far enough into the game. I've played for about maybe 12 hours or something like that, but I haven't really gotten far enough in the game to see the stuff that like people are making videos about. And I've been watching quite a few videos about Dragon Age the Vanguard, but I thought this one best represented. It showed like footage from what people seem to be having problems with. Now, Metatron's known for his history videos, and he's very, very good at what he does. But I thought his video on Dragon Age was really, really good because it showcased a lot of the things that people are having criticisms about. So what I thought I would do is I thought I would start playing his video, and because it shows the footage of what a lot of people are having problems with it. And then we'll talk about whether it's related to the actual story. So for me, one of the big things about, like, especially the Dragon Age series is about doing the series justice. Like, especially for me in particular, setting is important, right? When you make if you're making a game in an IP that's already being used, it's really important to not destroy the setting when you're making a game, right? Now, Dragon Age the Vanguard is the Dragon Age series, especially with Origins, which I've played like crazy, and a bit of 2, is very much a dark fantasy story, right? Everything about it almost has like a Christian medieval vibe to it, especially with the Fade and how you've got like lust demons and anger demons, or what they call wrath demons. So it's sort of like a dark fantasy setting. Especially like when you play Dragon Age, like you really get a sense of the peril that the world is in. It's not like, say, like a Dragon Age game or a Dungeons and Dragons game or a Planescape Torment game where it's more just an adventure. This, like, you get the feeling that this is an epic adventure and the world is in peril and that you are the hero of the world and your actions will matter. That's something that you really feel from the Dragon Age story, from the Dragon Age series in particular, right? So I found it very interesting when, even before I started playing the game, I found that there was a lot of criticism to it. Now, with my own personal playthrough, I haven't really found, yes, the combat is a little bit simplistic and the game is a little bit easy in comparison to other titles, like especially Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Origins. But it wasn't like a failed game, it wasn't like a bad game, you know. But I was really disappointed when I found out that they weren't going to be making any more DLC for the Vanguard, especially since all the other Dragon Age games got DLC, to my understanding. Inquisition got 3 DLC, Dragon Age Origins got DLC, Dragon Age 2 I'm pretty sure got DLC. So I was very disappointed when I found out that this wasn't going to be getting any DLC. It looks like this project is pretty much dead on arrival. All we're going to be getting is Vanguard, and that's it. And I really don't like that because I wanted the Dragon Age series to continue. I've had a lot of good experiences playing it. I love the setting. I think that it's very unique. It's not just a typical fantasy setting. It's really well developed, which is something that I really like, especially in comparison to, say, like the Warhammer Fantasy setting. Like, I really like Dragon Age, and I really like the way that they've done it, and I'm very disappointed that this game isn't getting DLC. But it sort of leads to a problem where, essentially, like, the gamers, there seems to be a lot of backlash from gamers, and it's kind of like, well, I want my Dragon Age series to continue, so I think I'll react to the video now, because the video really showcases some of the things that really, I think a lot of people had problems with, especially like from what I've seen, is them injecting woke politics to a point that it's overriding the story. And one of the things that is really important in games is escapism, right? One of the great things about playing like video games in general is being able to escape from the modern world's problems, right? Just being able to go into a fantasy setting and play a game. Now, some people will say that, oh, but politics have always been in games, but there's a point where it's on the nose and you can really see it, and there's a point where it's more subtle. So I think I'll start Metatron's video because it's an absolute beauty.
Metatron, stick to history. Metatron, stay in your lane. This is such an embarrassing take. Sometimes on this platform, apart from doing my deep dives into historical matters, I enjoy talking about topics or subjects that I personally care about. Whether it be, for example, with my recent video about D&D and its current situation, or this upload, which is specifically about the current state of the gaming industry. And of course, I talk about this coming from the perspective of a full-on gamer since the freaking 80s. So yeah, this does affect me. That is why, no matter who gets offended in the comments, I'll keep making these videos, and therefore I shall continue to share my personal point of view freely. If you are, however, a subscriber who is only and exclusively interested in history, then that's fair, I can respect that. Feel free to skip the upload. What I'm about to say may indeed offend you. That is because I will be fair, but I will tell it how it is. Backlash or no? We are clearly getting to a point where if you want to be politics-free, as you are enjoying your gaming hobby, you have to play indie games or retro. Because AAA is, for the most part, under the control of activists. Now, I am profusely annoyed by the juxtaposition of political propaganda within modern AAA gaming industry. It's everywhere, and that's a fact. And by propaganda, I mean any piece of fiction that is specifically designed to make the viewer adopt a certain position on a specific controversial issue. That is why I'm gonna say now that in this specific climate, to be based is to recognize that all sorts of political propaganda that is specifically pushed in video games is out of place. And whether this is political propaganda coming from your favorite side or from your opposing side should be inconsequential. That's being based. Do you follow me? Before jumping into the meat and bones of this video, considering the fact that the audience of this channel is quite mixed politically, let me just tell you today the same thing that I told my right-wing fans when I debunked Andrew Klavan at the Daily Wire. If you're a left-wing fan of mine and the topic of this video offends you, skip it. So I'm just going to say it. Dragon Age the Veilguard is an identity politics simulator disguised as a fantasy RPG, produced with the intent of pushing politics into the gaming sphere to change people's minds. Having established that fact, if you still like it because of your personal political affiliations, then be honest about it and own it. I can respect honesty. But before you do that, I'd propose a thought experiment first to show you where I'm coming from. After the thought experiment is over, if you still think I'm being biased, hey, at least you know I'm being fair here. Thought experiment. Hey look, a new Dragon Age game came out. I'm so excited, I'm a longtime fan. It's called Dragon Age MKGA? MKGA? What's that? Make the Kingdom Great Again. Huh. Main story. You're a kingdom patriot and your mission is to kick the feminist orcs out of the country, build a wall to prevent illegal immigration into the kingdom, and make it great again. Side quest 1. Woke blue-haired goblins are infesting the farmland. Eliminate them. Quest 2. Prevent the defunding of the city guard. Quest 3. Help the trade guild save the free market from the socialist chaos warriors. Quest 4. A clan of dark elves are trying to take away freedom of speech from our empire. Quest 5. Reach the apothecary and use musk to create a remedy against the woke virus pandemic outbreak in the village. Quest 6. The Duke Joe Bite Them is trying to take your swords from you. defend your right to bear arms. I am pretty confident that if a game like this existed, the monumental backlash it would get online from the liberals in this country would be of epic proportions.
All right, so I'm just gonna chime in here. It's like, oh, 100%. I am really tempted because I've just started. I've always wanted to make some games, so I just started to look into like game development. I sort of have a background as a programmer, as a sort of web design person, but I guess we'll see. I think I would love to make that game for no other reason than to troll people, because it's 100% right what Metatron's saying here. It's if somebody made a game like that, the leftist journalists would be rioting almost. And I would say in that scenario, they would be correct to do so, right? Because that game that Metatron just theoretically proposed would be propaganda. There's no question about it. It 100% would be. Now, some people might say, Metatron's going to cover this later, where politics have always been in games. And it's like, yes and no, right? So I would argue that that's not necessarily the case. I would argue that sometimes it's better when a game is apolitical or more simplistic on the political front than if you get wholeheartedly into a political game. And so what I mean by that is, the example that I'm going to give is, say, Star Wars, the trilogy, right? A very beloved trilogy, right? Of epic proportion. People loved it, right? Now, I absolutely love the Star Wars trilogy. I'm not a fan of Rey Skywalker. I watched the one movie with her. I decided after that I'm not going to watch anything with her again. The reason I didn't watch anything with her is because I found her to be a boring character, right? Is that she is a Skywalker character in name only, right? What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at like the original trilogy, Luke Skywalker has to go through, say, what we call the hero's journey in order to become a Jedi, right? And so he goes through a journey of some kind, which is a very common trope in movies and, when you talk about stories, right? She completely destroys that story, because unlike Luke Skywalker, who in his first fight against Darth Vader lost an arm, and then in his second fight against Darth Vader was almost defeated by the Emperor until Darth Vader decided to save him, right? So, in my opinion, if you're going to replace a character or you're going to build upon a story, you should understand the question of, why is it that people like that character or story in the first place, right? Because there's no point in creating like a new version of that if you don't understand critically why that character who you're trying to replace was beloved. And it was very clear to me that the people who wrote the character Rey didn't understand anything about why Luke Skywalker was liked, right? In the very first movie that I watched, she managed to beat Kylo Ren, who had been trained by an evil Jedi, right, in the Force and in lightsaber dueling, right? Rey, with no training at all, with not being trained by anyone, somehow manages to beat him, right? And she doesn't even beat him in an intelligent way. Like, for instance, if she had, say, used her wits to lure him into an unfair fight, then it would have been a little bit more believable of an untrained Jedi beating a trained one, right? But because she beat him in the first movie, it's like, I don't see any reason to watch the additional movie. It's like, she already won. Whoever wrote this character, Rey Skywalker, really didn't understand why the original like Skywalker was so beloved. So the point is that if you are going to recreate, if you're going to like make a new Dragon Age game, right, you need to understand why it was that the previous games were so beloved. And I don't think the people who wrote Veilguard understand why, as we'll start to see later on.
And you know what? I would join you. 100%. Be like, what the heck is this? Let me play my games. No politics in games. Now, this is not what's happening now. Therefore, I'm reacting to the other side.
Oh, I forgot. So my original point was, one of the big reasons why people play, what I was coming to at the start was with the Star Wars point, is that Star Wars, the trilogy, was an apolitical story. Okay, it didn't matter whether you are conservative or a Democrat in America, you could love it, right? So the plot was really simple, right? You know, the Empire bad, right? The Empire consists of, now there is like a philosophical conflict between the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force, which is not really, it's not really I suppose you could say, explored in depth in the original trilogy per se, because it does get to quite a bit of depth. But for the sake of simplicity, it's really simple, right? Luke Skywalker, good. He's helping the rebels. He represents the light side of the Force. Darth Vader represents the dark side of the Force. He's working with the Emperor, who wants to take over the Space Empire or whatever. Okay, cool. So that's the story. That story is apolitical, right? Now, what's the other big point as to why people would, say, watch a movie? The other big point that Metatron's going to cover here is escapism, right? Being able to play a video game or watch a movie and escaping from the real world, right? A lot of people play video games and watch movies and TV shows in order to escape from the real world. So if you, now this isn't to say that you can't inject real world politics into a game or a TV show, but you sort of have to be very careful about how you do it, because you don't want it to be propaganda. There's nothing wrong with exploring themes. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with being knowledgeable about different religions and all of that. Like, even in the Final Fantasy stories, like in 7, it's very clear that the Japanese writers were aware of Norse mythology because Ouroboros was mentioned in it. And Ouroboros, I believe, is supposed to be the snake that chases its tail, which is supposed to be a representation of the world in Norse mythology, I think. So there's nothing wrong with understanding about political theories and mythology and all of that. But there's a difference between using that as a vehicle for story and propaganda. Like I said, if somebody made that Dragon Age MKGA game that Metatron was proposing in his thought experiment, liberals would be rightfully angry, calling it propaganda, and they would be within their rights to do so. But the same applies when you go to the other end of the spectrum. If you inject like leftist propaganda to the point that it's a machine for propaganda, well, that's not really a video game, that's propaganda. And I believe that players are smart enough to know the difference. And people don't like to be preached to. If I want somebody to preach to me, I'll watch a political show, because I'm watching it for that purpose. When you're playing it in games, as you will see later when you see the footage of the game, where it talks to the player as if they're children, it's annoying.
Pushing politics, as they clearly are. That's being based. No politics. But there is nothing that pisses me off more than gaslighting attempts and logical fallacies. You'll see plenty in the comments today. For example, people saying, there is no politics in games. Or the other version, there has always been politics in games. No, not like this. This game is a game that has a lot of intrigue and political backstabbing in it. However, that's only within its world and setting. Monumental difference. Not to mention, there is a massive difference between subtle political pandering and excessive political pandering. I'll show you why on this video. This game, it's the latter. Okay, Metatron, but are you sure that this game is that excessive? Alright, well, let me show you. Let's go.
So, I'm non-binary. Dragons wouldn't have kings. They'd have queens.
Then what are you?
Non-binary.
Non-binary.
I just said, and I'm going to use they instead of she from now on.
Oh, Tarsh isn't the first non-binary member of the Lords.
Non-binary.
The Shadow Dragons say there are people who use they instead of he or she. They're not men or women.
And I like how it feels when I imagine myself that way.
What does that mean? It means I don't feel like a man or a woman. I didn't expect the lords to care about the stuff. Me being non-binary.
Non-binary, I got it. He, she, they are non-binary. Okay. One time would have been enough.
Barely even wearing a shirt.
So what I wear is a problem for you?
I act more like a man than a woman. I am not my mother. It feels right. When she says I act more like a man, it feels right.
Do you like being a woman?
Nobody likes being a woman.
Isn't that misogynistic, by the way?
Thing about being a woman is hurting you.
And not feeling comfortable in their own skin? As a man, as a woman?
Turn her into something. I can't even be a woman right. Are you trying to have sex with me? Is it because I didn't fit as a woman? Is it why I don't fit as a woman? The Shadow Dragons had some fancy terms. Using they and knowing that, it feels... So I'm supposed to struggle with who I am? Even if I don't feel like I fit, even if I feel wrong?
She's still holding the ruby in her other hand. Maker's panties. I was so proud.
Oh,
Ah, shit. They're still holding it. Sorry.
No, literally, this is the whole game is like this.
I really hope not. But I guess we'll get into that a little bit later.
It feels like this is a game set in the modern period with a skin that makes it look like it's a medieval fantasy game. This is this.
what are you doing?
So, when one of us screws up and we know we've screwed up, we do a quick 10 to put it right.
Any reason you can't just apologize?
Yeah.
Sometimes people say, oops, sorry, and hope that fixes it. But they just want to get the whole thing over with. Trust me, I know. But pulling a bath, you sweat a little. Makes you think about it a little more. Shows the other person you mean it.
What if they mean it when they say they're sorry, though?
Yeah, I mean, if someone said they're sorry, it means they're already quite open-minded, to be honest. Not enough.
And that's the other reason. Some people mess up and get all dramatic. They make it about them.
This sounds familiar. Where did I hear this before?
Oh, you know, I didn't mean it right. I'd never do that on purpose. They feel so bad about it that it's on everyone else to smooth it over and make them feel better.
I don't think that way.
TikTok.
I wasn't raised that way. That's not how I feel.
Oh, you know, I didn't mean it right. I'd never do that on purpose.
I don't think that way.
Oh, they made the mess. They fix it. Done.
Really?
It was a little before your time, but Horlicks was one of ours.
Huh.
Bastard looked better than I did in a dress or pants.
Dress or
And
pants.
out of them, too.
Right. You know, maybe it's not even...
Okay. So there's some people who, well, actually no, there's a very small vocal minority of people who are going to say this is fine. And it's like, that's okay. I mean, I think one of the things that if I was actually playing the game and having like these really long discussions about this, it's like what Metatron said. This is not a game set in the Dragon Age world, okay? And one of the things that really peeves me off is when people destroy a setting in order to make it in order to inject whatever crap they want to inject into it. This does not feel like I'm playing a Dragon Age game when I'm watching that footage. It feels like I'm watching an episode of like a talk show or The View or something like that, and that's like great, but there's a couple of things here that make this out of the setting. It's like what Metatron said, where it's a modern game. It's a modern game set with a fantasy skin. So there's a couple of things here. The first is so Tash is a Qunari, and I did a little bit of research on the Qunari because I have a lot of experience with Dragon Age Origins and Sten. And the Dragon Age and the Dragon Age series, the Qunari are quite sort of a unique part of it, right? And one of the things about the Kunari is they follow a philosophy called the Kun, which is basically a philosophy that says it's all about giving up individualism for the collective good. And this scene between, and in the Kunari sort of society, it's sort of broken up into castes that do with certain things. So I think that the Arashek are scouts, and so it's all about collectivism and the collective good over the individual. The other thing is that this thing of Tash calling herself or calling themselves they, that is purely a modern vernacular, right? We've never seen any other example of something like this that I've ever seen being used in the Dragon Age series. It's set in a medieval fantasy. It's set in a dark fantasy story. In this story, in the Dragon Age Veilguard series game, the game is about stopping the Blight and about stopping two elven gods, and elven gods who were trapped by, I can't remember his name, Dreadwolf, because they were evil gods, right? And so these gods have been let loose, and they are spreading the Blight, and your job is to stop the Blight. Now, if you've played the Dragon Age series, you would have known that the Blight is terrible. It absolutely ravages the land. It's like a plague, right? A plague of undead, right? And infects things, turns people more. So it's a really sort of dark fantasy, sort of horror setting, right? Now, in this dark fantasy horror game, where we are, we're supposed to be fighting against two elven gods so really it's a dire setting, right? And in that setting, we now have loads and loads of footage of people talking about using pronouns, and that if you're offending people, and about microaggressions, essentially. I don't know why that's in a Dragon Age game. It's never been in a Dragon Age game before. It wasn't part of the setting. It sounds like propaganda to the extent that it's used. If they had just had... Now, Metatron's going to say this later. Dragon Age Origins, which was developed in 2009, which was a game that I played, had a gay character in it, or a bisexual character in it. It was an elf, right? I don't think anybody had any problem with that, right? Because there was a point in that game where Metatron will talk about after where the character would proposition you at some point. But it was totally optional. You could decline the offer, and the character would never bring it up again. Or you could take up that offer and have a romance with that character. Now, I don't think I ever heard anybody complaining about that game, right? You might have had a small minority, I can't check, but I never heard of anybody complaining about that game being part of the woke brigade, because it didn't feel like that. It was a choice, right? This game, though, based on all the footage that I've seen in Metatron's video and other footage, it really feels like it's propaganda. It doesn't feel like a game. I totally understand why a lot of gamers are getting refunds, why it didn't hit the sales of the other AAA games. I totally understand why it's not getting DLC. But it's very disappointing, because I wanted to see a continuation of the Dragon Age Veilguard series. I don't think we're going to see it. I think it's over. It not getting DLC is a very bad sign. Unless a different developer picks up the IP, like what happened with Fallout 3 with Bethesda, I don't think we're going to see any more of it, but I guess we'll see. But let's continue on.
And the politics, that was so boring to watch. Like, I got it, okay. Not male and female, which is a binary concept, binary and non-binary, which is still a binary concept. I'm joking, my God. Oh, Metatron, are you saying we should hate that? No, I'm not hating on anyone. Goodness gracious. It's the whole game. Dragon Age, the Veilguard. Ladies.
I really hope that's not the case. But I've only played like 12 hours into it, but yeah, hopefully I can skip it. But I guess we'll see.
Ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember the whole situation with the game Starfield and how people got really, really upset with it because of the, politics and inclusion in the game? Did I make a video about that? No. Why? Because all the game was doing, really, it was that during the character creator, you had the choice of preferred pronoun. Now, personally, there are pronouns that really annoy me, such as bunny, bunny self, demon, demon selves. Never gonna use those in a million years. But of course, if you want to use those, feel free, free country, freedom of speech. But I did want to check the game to see if it really had excessive politics in it. And to be honest, I didn't hear the whole pronoun thing throughout the entire game, so it didn't bother me. It's like, I'm like, okay, well, whatever. If someone likes that, they can choose it. More power to you. I don't care about it, and that was the end of it. And I remember people complaining, saying like, oh, why are you being so exaggerated? It's not like the game is pushing identity politics, pronouns, and all the rest through the entirety of the story. It's just at the beginning you're all overreacting. I agree. What about now, though? Are you gonna use the same line? Because this game... this game is nuts. This game is nuts. But most importantly...
Oh, I wanted to cut in there. So... The other reason why this Tash character is so inconsistent with the Dragon Age story is because I did my research. Like, I've obviously got experience with Sten, but I did my research on the Qunari. And in relation to like what I said before with the Kun, their philosophy, it's actually not that uncommon in Qunari society for someone not to have a very sort of familial relationship with their parents, because raising the Qunari children is seen as it's handled by like a collective, like a group of people who raise children. So these scenes where you've got like Tash having sort of disagreements with their mother, it doesn't really feel like it's consistent with the Qunari story. That's more like something that would happen in our world. And it's like, that's fine, but you picked a Qunari character to... And you basically turned the Qunari character into a human being and literally like gotten rid of their entire history almost, just so that you can have a character. Like, it would have made more sense if they did it with a human character, but to do it with a Qunari character, especially the Qunari in specific, is I don't think the person who created this character actually knew what a Qunari was. I would be very surprised if they played Dragon Age Origins or any of the Dragon Age games, because the Kun philosophy is very sort of important to the Qunari as a whole. And yes, there are Qunari who don't follow it. I just feel that the Tash character could have been better done if they had at least somehow stuck within the Dragon Age setting of the Qunari. It might have been better instead of making her into like a modern teenager in our world. I don't understand. Like, yeah, this character doesn't feel like a Dragon Age character. It feels like a modern person, and it's like, that's fine, but it's like, then why do it in a Dragon Age game? Why don't you just create a new game? It's like, there's no point in having there's no point in putting the name Dragon Age on the game, because it's not a Dragon Age game. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to completely destroy the setting just to inject your politics in there, you might as well just have created a brand new setting. It's very annoying, especially to the original fans of the Dragon Age series. So I totally understand why they're angry. Some of them are definitely bigots, like Metatron will say later. I'm not going to deny that. But it's like, don't call this Dragon Age. Right? It's like, so that this is almost like false advertising, because I'm thinking I'm getting a Dragon Age game, right? But it's basically, you should call it Modern Politics Woke Simulator. That's pretty much what it is. Now, there may be a very small minority of gamers who like that, but considering that the game's not getting DLC, I don't think that's the case. And it's like, why would you even bother to make a Dragon Age game if you didn't understand who your target market was? It's like they made the game and then they're like, oh, we're not going to take DLC for it. It's like, obviously the game's failed. Otherwise, they would have made DLC for it. Every other game got DLC. Every other Dragon Age game got DLC. So, and now they're going to do Mass Effect. It's like, well, that's if they're going to do the same thing, that's probably going to fail as well. For the same reason. Yeah, so.
And this is where I think any fan of the game can step in and talk, regardless of their political affiliations. This is not Dragon Age. Can we be honest about this? Like, if you've played, I've finished Dragon Age Origins 3 times, one of my favorite games ever. First time as a warrior elf, second time as a Templar, and third time as a blood mage, because I thought that was really, really cool. And I even started it again as a dwarf. That game was great. But this is not Dragon Age, which connects to the next point I have for you today. The reason why we, fans of the series, are so annoyed with this is because they have taken a well-established gaming series, gutted it to the bones, and filled it with completely out-of-place modern identity politics which do not belong to this universe, and literally made the game unrecognizable and, for many people, unplayable. Not to mention, do you remember when I said, hey, during the character creator, do whatever you want, more power to you? Problem is that in this game you have no option. This is the story. You're gonna run into all of these insufferable dialogues due to the fact that they are really poorly written. And just, that's the game. So it's gonna become a chore that you have to push through in order to be like, can I have a little bit of suspension of disbelief? Can I use the game for what I always use them for, which is escapism? And good luck escaping from the current toxic, may I add, political obsession, tribalism, and polarizing discourse on the internet. Like, literally, that's all you're showered with.
Yeah, I really agree with this. Like some people are very political, and that's fine. For some people, politics is really important, right? And this isn't to say that, everybody having freedom of rights is not important, but the point is that, like I said, sometimes you just want to escape from a game. You just want to escape from the modern world's problems, right? And like one of the reasons why people play video games is to do just that. Now, I suppose I can think of a game like a better game that had. I suppose you could say politics in it was Wastelanders 3. Now, that game in particular, in my opinion, had a much better... Wasteland 3. That game had a much... So, in that game, there's you had the Patriarch, which is a... villain or hero, depending upon, most likely a villain in my opinion, depending upon which side you take. You have a faction of people who are obsessed with Ronald Reagan, an AI that's Ronald Reagan. Now, in that game, the politics was in there, but it was handled really well. It didn't feel like the game was preaching to you, because it was more using those politics as a representation of, as part of the story of factions you could align or not align with, right? But I think like what Metatron is saying is, it's like, so in that game, it doesn't feel like for instance, if you don't like conservatives and you're playing Wasteland 3, you can choose to not help the Ronald Reaganites. And you can choose to go against the Patriarch in that game, who's like the main hero villain, most likely a villain, in that game. So it doesn't feel like it's forced on you. You have player agency. But if what Metatron is saying is true, where you can't skip, where this is the story and it's not skippable, then it's not really playing a game. It's more the game playing you, right? Because if that's the story, then it's like, well, now I'm forced to now I have to have identity politics in it. Now I have to watch identity politics, even if I don't want to watch it. Irrespective of whether I'm this or that or lean this way or that way, maybe I don't want to watch Fox News, maybe I don't want to watch CNN, maybe I don't want to watch any of these channels because I don't want to, like, I just want to escape from all these problems, right? And now you're taking all these problems and you're forcing them into a video game. Now you could say, no, play the video game, but you called it Dragon Age. Right? So as a Dragon Age consumer and a historical fan, I assume that when I buy a Dragon Age game, and luckily I didn't buy it, I got it with EA Pass. I'm very happy about that, EA Play Pro, because I wouldn't have paid full price for it. I can tell you that much, right? But now it's forced upon me, right? Against my will. It's like now I have to like listen to like propaganda in my video game. Right? Propaganda is propaganda. It's annoying, irrespective of which side it sits on. And it's like, if you're putting it in video games, if you want to be an activist, just go be an activist. Okay? Go join the Democrats or whatever. Go, I don't know, become a YouTuber and become an activist and make documentaries or whatever, like Michael Moore did. You're welcome to do that, but I don't know why these people in the games industry, because the games industry is about providing good games. It's about providing good game experiences. If you want to create a new IP that has all this woke stuff in it, and you can find a target market for it that's going to sell, great. By all means, more power to you. Go do it, right? But injecting it into existing IPs that didn't have it is disrespectful to the people who are the original gamers, because this is not a Dragon Age game. It almost, the footage, it almost feels as if like they're talking to me as if I'm a child, right? And it's like, no wonder this game didn't get any DLC. And from what I've seen, the sales of it are not doing too good, especially for a AAA game that took like 8 or 10 years in development. So, yeah.
That's not good for the mind. So really the only option for the gamer, either I get continuously exposed to your propaganda and play the game, or I don't play the game. As a fan of the series, I take issue with that.
Now here's the other problem, is that even if you do play the game, right, the way that marketing works is that even if you watch an ad and your logical mind doesn't agree with it, or ignores it, your subconscious mind actually takes it on, right? So you may see an ad for McDonald's, right? And you may not think anything of it, but then at one point later on, you get hungry, and then suddenly you get this inclination to go to McDonald's. That's how advertising works. So they know what they're doing, because if you're playing through this game, you are having woke politics injected into you, right? 100%. There's no way about it, because if the story's like this, so it's very, very clear this is a piece of propaganda. Like, that's what it is. And it's like I said, people don't like propaganda. People didn't like it in World War II. People don't like the idea of being sold to. And this game is trying to sell a philosophy, and it's fine to have that philosophy, but this is almost like false advertising, because I don't know why it says Dragon Age on the game. It's not a Dragon Age story.
It's disrespectful towards those gamers that have supported you throughout all these years. But that's the point. I think they're doing it on purpose to choose well-established and loved series to do this. They do it, one, because those games they think will sell due to the popular name. They'll attract people, they have no idea. They play because they like role-playing games, and then they're exposed to whatever this is. Although then again, Steam reports have just proven that's not really enough to make people still like your game after you've made it unrecognizable. Two, they do it because they know people who love these games will outrage, and then they can use all of their ad hominem attacks to call you homophobic, transphobic, blah blah phobic, and ban you from their forums for...
I guess, but it seems like a waste of resources to me. I mean, if the game doesn't sell, and they destroy an IP, sooner or later, the investors are going to pull out. I mean, eventually at some point, because like this is becoming a recurring theme with, like it happened with Dustborn, there's a lot of like woke games and movies and TV shows that have just absolutely failed, and they keep failing. I don't know when they're going to run out of money at some point, but eventually they will have to run out of money, because at the end of the day, if you're in the entertainment industry, your job is to sell a product, right? And at the end of the day, you need a target market to buy that product. Now, if you are attacking your target demographic, which is what the games industry seems to be doing, right, by treating all gamers as if they're like homophobic bigots, and they're all like fascists or something like that. If you are like antagonistic towards your gamer base, because it's very clear that a lot of these companies, they don't like gamers, so it's weird that they're making products for the people that they don't like. It's very strange to me that they're doing this, because it's like, who are you making this product for? It's like, it's very clear that the fact that it's not getting DLC means that it didn't hit the sales targets that they wanted. And now they're going to make Mass Effect 3. They're probably going to do the same thing. It's probably going to fail like Dragon Age Valguard is doing. And then they're just probably going to do it again. It's really bizarre to me. It's like, it's almost as if like they're treating these games as if like they're expendable properties whose job is to just move the move the battle line 1 point forward, as if like they're expending guardsmen. If it was 40k. But yeah, so I have no idea what they're doing. I hope they stop doing it and they just get back to making games, or at least just make a new game. If you want to like make this game, that's fine. Don't call it Dragon Age. Just make a new game, right? That way the Dragon Age fans aren't getting ticked off because you're not messing with an existing IP, and the other fans can be fine. If there's enough of them, they can buy it. Great, no problem. Everyone's happy. I don't know why they don't just do that.
Or hate speech, given, to be fair, will there be a fraction of those people that are outraging, that are doing it because they are homophobic, transphobic, hateful, toxic? Absolutely. But they are treating everyone the same way. And that's unfair. Denaturalizing loved series will get you backlash. Not because people are bigots, but because that's not Dragon Age anymore. And we wanted a Dragon Age. We are customers, we are clients, we are gamers, we matter. And before my words are misconstrued, as they will be anyways, so by my haters, don't particularly care. But you, my audience, I do care, that you understand exactly where I'm coming from. I'm a very live and let live individual. Adults, consenting adults, do whatever you want. Free country, I say. I'm only defending gaming as something that I don't want to be involved in very divisive discourse. Games have been historically a uniting force. I've played games with people that were completely different from me, politically, culturally, and that was never a problem, because the games were the one place where you don't need to talk about these things, you're just enjoying the hobby together. I played Warhammer Fantasy, I played Warhammer 40k tabletop, video games, 4X, with people of all sorts of backgrounds, and it was never a problem, because they were a separate sphere, and that was the beauty of the hobby. That's going away now. We will speak, we will not stay silent, and our voices will be heard. You can gaslight as much as you want, you can try to shame as much as you want, and you can do all the ad hominem you want. We're still gonna speak. And since we've been talking about strawman, let me anticipate some of the strawman attacks that I will get in the comments. Let's go. Strawman, are you saying that gay people, transgender lesbians should hide and live in fear? No. As I have explained in almost every single video that is LGBT related, whether it be in history, whether it be in the media, whether it be in the filming industry or the gaming industry, I apply the same law equally to everyone. Thus, if you are acting in an indecent manner in public, say on a street or in front of a school, I would tell you, go home and do it in private, in the privacy of your home, whether you be straight or whether you be gay. Because what you do in the privacy of your home is your business, not mine. But what you do in the public is public business, straight or gay. Strawman 2. So are you saying all characters in these games should be straight? Huh? You know, the reason why this one is such a stupid one is because you know for a fact that's not the case. I mean, Dragon Age Origins, which I've just said is a absolutely monumental masterpiece, did give you the option of romance with your party members. And guess what? You also had options to have same-sex romance. Thing is though, it wasn't pushed like this. It was in fact subtle. It was elegant in a way, because you had this character that I still remember is like an elf assassin, but he's like bi, so he could have a romance regardless of your character's gender. And then at one point, as you are in the camp deep into the game, after you have established deep connections with many party members, this character would have a little advance towards you, and the player response to that advance would shape what would happen afterwards. So if you decline it, he will politely back off, and that will not be back ever again in the game. But if you do accept it, then you had the option to romance him. Where was all the backlash? Where are all the homophobes? They're not there.
The other thing that I'm going to do an example of, I can't believe he actually had to put that straw man in, but there is a percentage of the population that is just so dumb that think that, oh, if you're saying that you don't like people messing with a story, it's because that you hate like trans people or something. And it's like, what has a video game got to, like, I don't understand the logic here behind how that makes sense. It's like telling someone to not mess with an IP and adding stuff that's not a part of that IP is not the same as trying to create laws that discriminate against people on race, religion, or sex, right? Or gender, right? If you're trying to create laws that are discriminating people on those bases, then yes, you are a bigot of some kind, right? I mean, it's like, I don't understand like the logic behind that, but there is a very small percentage of the population that's a very vocal percentage that doesn't understand that. But if you understand them, a lot of the times they seem to think the reason that they think that way is because, like the communists of old, they believe that everyone who disagrees with them is like a fascist, right? And that's a very common trope in like totalitarianism, right? If you look at like the communists of old who were mass murderers, like the Nazis were, this idea of, if you're not with me, you're against me, is very common amongst those 10 groups of people. But it also tends to shape why they create games like these and why they react to people, to the gamers, the way that they do. So what happens is they create these sorts of games because they believe that society is like, it's a fascist society, the West that people live in, right? That's what they believe, right? And that they're fighting against it. Interestingly enough, though, they never understand that if they were living in a fascist society, and they would probably be in a gulag if this was the Soviet Union, or they'd be in a concentration camp, right? But the way that they tend to think is that, oh, we're fighting a war, and everyone who disagrees with us is the enemy, and that's a problematic way to think. That, you know what I mean? That's delusions of paranoia. Right? Because if you believe that everybody who disagrees with you there's many reasons why someone could disagree with you, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they oppose you politically. That's my experience with these people, because I've debated them quite a bit. But that's the reason why they tend to think. It's the reason why that's the reason why they are not gamers, right? Because gamers don't think that way. The majority of them, right? They don't think. Now, there are many different types of gamers. Right? Not everybody has the same thing. Not everybody has the same opinion on different topics. A lot of people, nowadays say that the Iraq War was a mistake. Back then, people were saying it was like split, right? So even amongst gamers, you get like a division between their political stances and what they believe about certain issues, right? But the thing that's sort of a uniting factor about being a gamer is the fact that, like Metatron said, it allows you to play with people of different political walks of life and you can just play a game and not talk about politics and just talk about the game, right? So that's a very useful thing about video games, is that I can join in a Helldivers forum, a Helldivers 2 game, and just about play with anybody, and it's great, right? It's great to be able to just play with people, because politics, religion, and sex, these two topics, is a reason they're considered taboo in polite conversation, because they're very divisive topics. Okay, they've done studies on this scientifically, and what they've found is that they've surveyed people before. I can't remember the study. What they found was, when people started asking political questions, their IQ actually drops. Or at least it did when these people did the survey on people. And I can't remember the survey, but they found it across like both sides. So people are very emotionally charged when it comes to politics, right? They have a emotional connection, right? And because of that, you end up with tribalism, where people believe something really strongly. And because they believe it really strongly, it tends to cause conflict, right? Especially with people who disagree with them, and there could be many reasons that you disagree with somebody, right? There could be very many reasons, right? But just because you disagree with someone about something, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on the opposite side of the political landscape. Right? But I've noticed that a lot of these woke people who inject politics into games, they don't seem to think that way from what I've seen. They seem to act as if like the world is a fascist place filled with neo-Nazis, the government's neo-Nazi, and it's like, hang on a minute, I've studied World War II history. If you were actually living in a fascist state, you'd probably, and you were trans, you'd probably be in jail. You'd probably be in a concentration camp of some kind. Like living in World War II Germany was horrible. Anybody who lives in the West cannot ever even attempt to say that they have experienced that, unless they actually lived through something like that. So I've sort of got on a tangent here, but the point is, that's the reason why these comments tend to come up. Like, they'll say things like, "Oh, so you're saying that trans people shouldn't have rights?" No, that's got nothing to do with the video game. I'm complaining, like Metatron is complaining, about the fact that this is not a Dragon Age game. If you want to create, they did the same thing with bloody Space Marine 2, right? Complaining that it wasn't woke enough, and it's like, Space Marine 2, the setting is essentially fascist, right? It's when I say fascist is not the right word, because it's not like there's neo-Nazis in Warhammer 40k, but it is a totalitarianist setting, because humanity is surviving. Humanity has to deal with threats in 40k that we living in this world never would have to deal with. Demonic incursions, tyrannids, orcs, you know what I mean? So sometimes, especially when you have a grim, dark setting, whether it's fantasy or sci-fi, it makes sense why you're not going to see modern politics, because our modern world is so different from the settings of these games that it wouldn't make sense to have things that you would have in a modern world. Like, for instance, I was playing the game Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, right? In that game, you can potentially try to help some elves, some Eldar, right? So what I tried to do was, I tried to help these Eldar who were in a broken ship by bringing them onto my ship. And what happened is the Eldar got killed by the other people on my ship. Now, I was annoyed at this initially, but I stopped being annoyed at it because I realized it's consistent with the setting of Warhammer 40k. Human beings in Warhammer 40k are xenophobic because of the fact that there are numerous alien species that are trying to destroy them, but also because of the Imperium of Man's control over the lives of human beings, as well as the ecclesiarchy, which is like the church. So, as much as it annoyed me, I wouldn't complain that it was out of setting because it's consistent with the Warhammer 40k setting, right? So that's where the complaint is here. It's not that they're complaining about a character being trans or using they them pronouns in a game. It's the fact that they're using it in a Dragon Age game that is the problem.
Because it wasn't excessive, and nobody cares about the options you choose with your personal playthrough. It's a similar topic as when we talk about racism, all these racists that don't want to see black people or in general non-whites in games, and that's why, because they're bigots and racists. Then I ask once again, where were all the racists and bigots in the 90s when Street Fighter 2, one of the most popular fighting game worldwide, had the most diverse character roster probably ever made? Literally, there is a character per skin tone, a character per ethnicity, and every single one of them is represented in a really cool, and you could say inclusive way. No one bat an eye. Where were all the racists complaining about Balrog, or Mike Bison in the Japanese original? DJ, nothing. Zero. No racists. In fact, I've seen plenty of white people choosing those characters because they looked cool. Now, given Blanca wasn't the most accurate representation of a Brazilian, I suppose, and Rose isn't a typical Italian name, but apart from that, where were all the racists? Nowhere, because you cannot tell me with a straight face, if you're being honest, that Ultra Street Fighter 2 is on the same level of inclusivity and politics as Street Fighter 6. Hence, the massive difference in response is clearly based on how these messages and how much the inner messages have been pushed, rather than any issue with racism or homophobic/transphobic sentiment of the public. Just as a matter of deductive logic. And since we mentioned gaslighting, let's finish.
Alright, so I wanted to discuss another point, which is in modern gaming, especially on YouTube, there's always this discussion of, like, when you say woke or DEI, these are essentially like purgative words, right, in order to denounce a game. Like, for instance, like, Steam has a curator called Steam Baby Ink Detected, which, you know, I like Steam Baby Ink Detected because it was about time that this company got outed. But it sort of raises a question of, is it possible to do, because there's nothing wrong with representation like what Metatron's talking about here, right? The Street Fighter game had Street Fighter 2 had big representation, right? So there's nothing wrong with representation. I think the big problem with Dragon Age the Veilguard and modern gaming is the way that it's being done at Triple H Studios. I would like to see DEI done right, as opposed to in a propagandistic way, right? I would like to see them have like representation in games. Like, for instance, I have autism, right? And I don't think I've ever seen an autistic character. I would love to see an autistic character. In fact, like I said before, I'm sort of throwing my hat in the ring and getting started in game development. Probably take a couple of years before I can even get a game up and running, but I would love to see like an autistic character in a video game, and have their autism play a part in their powers. I think that would be really cool. But I wouldn't want to see every single character then become an autistic character. There's representation, and then there's tokenism. Tokenism is bad, where you're just ticking off checks on a box on a piece of paper about, like, I need to have this kind of character, and this kind of character, and you're actually having representation. So I think representation is good. I just think the way that it's being done in the Veilguard and in modern gaming in a lot of cases is where the problem is, right? I think that it can be done right. I just don't think the current AAA studios can do it, because I think that the people that they're hiring to write these stories are activists, and I don't think they're writers. Okay, I think that there should be writers who can write, inclusive stories. I don't think that inclusivity is a problem in and of itself. I think it's the way it's being done. I think because they're hiring activists, that's the reason why these stories are ending up the way that they are. They're not ending up the way that they are because the writers that they have are good writers. They're ending up the way that they are because the writers that they have are bad writers, and they don't really have a wealth of experience, and they've probably only read the Communist Manifesto, and they probably live in a little echo chamber. And because of that, they're not sort of well versed in different philosophies and counter-imposing philosophies to their own. And because they don't have that breadth of philosophical knowledge and mythological knowledge to draw on, you end up with these games being skins for modern politics because that's all they know. They can't write good stories because they don't know what good stories are. They don't know what things are like about the hero's journey, and they don't understand why the Dragon Age series was so beloved and what made it beloved, right? They probably think it was a game that was written by white supremacists, and they're just fixing it. And I think that might be why these stories end up being the way that they are. Because it's I think in order to be a good writer, if you want to write sci-fi, you need to read a lot of sci-fi books, right? If you're going to write fantasy, you need to play a lot of fantasy games, and you need to read a lot of fantasy stories, right? I don't think these people who wrote this have done either. And when I say read, I mean actually read. I mean actually think about the different philosophies, like the philosophy of the Kun and all of that. I think that's what makes someone a good writer, and I don't think these people who wrote especially who wrote the Tash character, really understand how to write good stories.
On a high note, Dragon Age the Veilguard. Let's see what Wikipedia tells us. It must be speaking about all of this, right? Dragon Age the Veilguard is an action role-playing video game developed by BioWare and published by Electronic Arts. The fourth major game in the Dragon Age franchise, the Veilguard is the sequel to Dragon Age Inquisition. Technically, but no. 10 years after Inquisition, the game features new locations in the fictional world of Thedas for the player to explore. The game's development, which began in 2015, has been marked by lengthy delays, several fundamental changes in design, yet we can see each and every single one of them, and high staff turnover. The game was announced as Dragon Age Dreadwolf in 2022 and retitled Dragon Age the Veilguard in June 2024. I'll give them that the second one is better, and also I love this shade of purple, so I've seen people complaining about the combat. I've seen people, I've seen people complain about the storytelling, people complain about everything, but I gotta give it to the artists are good. And let's not attack the artists just because we disagree with how the game has been handled by the suits and the activists. They have nothing to do with it, and most likely they're just doing their job, and I love the poster. Dragon Age The Veilguard released for PlayStation 5, Windows and Xbox Series XS on October 31st, 2024. The game received generally positive reviews from the critics.
It didn't even get the Elsevier. Oh, I don't know who wrote this Wikipedia page. I'm going to try and edit it. I don't know who wrote this Wikipedia page, but whoever wrote this page is clearly not living in the world that I live in. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, gaslighters. Unlike in previous games, customization options include body size and body part selections that are independent of the voice of or pronouns she, her, he, him, they, them, chosen for the player character.
Well, I mean, yes and no, but that's not really actually true. Other videos have covered this, but in this game, you can't actually increase your bust size for your characters and their butt sizes to have big butts or to have big breasts, or to have big cleavage. So that's not actually technically true. You don't actually have customization. You have some customization. But no, it's very clear that when they created the pre-selection for the characters, they were thinking with a particular demographic in mind, a demographic that doesn't seem to like the idea of having people play as a busty woman or a busty character or a character with a big butt. which is kind of weird because it's supposed to be an RPG game. You should be able to make your character almost however you want. So that's not really true.
Doesn't surprise. Players are also be able to remake their character in Dragon Age Inquisition, which appears in the game, blah blah blah. Unlike previous games, this is gonna be like, I think we're gonna see, unlike previous games, 17 times in this article. In this series, players cannot directly control the companions in combat. That is a horrible choice. The companions in Veilguard, well, let me start it right. Unlike previous games, the companions in Veilguard are described as pansexual, allowing romances with player characters of any gender, but Bush said that they were not player sexual, or only attracted to the player's character.
Oh, yes, I forgot. So, before some of you say, like that are watching this, that, you're just a homophobe, as some of you will, or, okay. Another game, I don't think I covered this, Baldur's Gate 3. In that game, and I think that Baldur's Gate 3 is an epic game. It's an absolutely epic game. In that game, you can romance every single party member in your party. And yet I don't have a problem with that game. I've played that game for like 30, 40 hours, I think. And nobody seems to be having the same problems that they have with Dragon Age Veilguard with Baldur's Gate 3. So no, it's not just about the fact that because the characters obviously all the party members in Baldur's Gate 3 are pansexual, because the player every single one of them propositions the player character. I never had a problem with that because it was totally optional, right? Which is fine. So, no, it's not about the fact that the characters in Dragon Age Veilguard are pansexual. It has to do with the way that it was implemented. Baldur's Gate 3 did it right. Dragon Age the Veilguard did it wrong.
Right. It's real time instead of tactical strategy. Again, for me, that's a big no-no, but maybe because I'm a old school type of gamer.
This is sort of beside the point, but yes, I have to agree. The best Dragon Age game, in my opinion, is the Origins. I really liked the combat system in Origins. But I understand why after Dragon Age 2 they moved away from it, because it was very complicated. It had like this trap system, which it sounds good in theory, but you never used. It wasn't that useful. I really loved the the explosives mechanic, where you could craft explosives with the poison skill. I thought that was really cool. It wasn't continued in the Dragon Age in the other games. Definitely not in Origin. No, definitely not in 2. But while in my opinion, the combat system in Dragon Age Origins was better, the combat system in Dragon Age the Veilguard is decent. It's not bad by any extent of the imagination. It's just that if you like Origins, the combat system, well, if you liked Origins, then you didn't like 2 and Inquisition. Yeah.
Reception, check this out. Dragon Age the Veilguard received generally favorable reviews from critics from its Windows and PlayStation 5 version, and universal acclaim for its Xbox Series XS version, according to the review aggregator website Metacritic. OpenCritics.
And somehow it's not going to get DLC. I don't know how that factors into this reality. I don't know why the person who wrote this thinks that. I don't get why they're lying. I this is the reality. It's like, you can lie as much as you want, but you can't make people like a game that they don't like. This is almost like they have professional PR teams whose job it is they're like professional spin doctors. Their job is to make you think that something that's crap is good. Yeah.
It's determined that 74% of critics recommended the game. This is, my gosh, unbelievable. They're not even one mention of the controversy. Nothing. They're pretending it didn't exist, which, by the way, I've noticed quite a few influencers and YouTubers do. You've got the super anti-woke that are like attacking this like their life depends on them. I don't like the super anti-woke approach because they start calling woke everything. But then again, I do understand where they're coming from. And then you've got the people that tell you, like, they will play the entire game and pretend nothing. It's like it's nothing. And then if you say anything, they pretend, no, I don't see anything. No. It's a Dragon Age, yeah. Great. There is a sword, like in other games. Yeah, seriously. Have some spine. That's what I mean when I say I'd rather respect someone who has the courage to stand up and say, no, I like this because I'm pro this specific kind of message and it needs to be pushed. At least I would disagree because I don't think any message should be pushed that is so overtly and excruciatingly political in games, but at least I would respect that more in a disagreeing way than someone who pretends, oh no, I don't know what you're talking about. No, it's not happening. No, I don't see it. I'm not going to speak about it. No. Anyways, Dragon Age, the fail god. You know what's really horrible about all of this? They're gonna make a Mass Effect. It's gonna be Mess Effect. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye.
Quick, think about us having sex. Like you wanna grab that.
You have to watch that entire scene because the way that Tash comes onto the character is very aggressive. I would use a different word, but the video would well, I'm not monetized now, but the video would become demonetized if I did use a different word. But that's what it feels like in this scene, especially if you watch the full scene. It's pretty bad. All right, so to summarize, it's not a problem of having representation in games. It's a problem of how it's done. In Dragon Age the Veilguard, in my opinion, it's done very poorly. It's so over the top that it's almost impossible to look at it without thinking that the people who created this game, they probably think the gamers are dumb. Right? They're probably like, oh, the dumb gamers, we need to tell them how to think because they don't know how to think. Right? It's very clear that the people who made this game, they don't care about the gamers. It's very clear if you look at like journalists online and game programmers, they don't like the gamers. They don't like you. It's pretty clear. You know, I'm happy that this. Well, no, I'm not. I'm happy. I'm happy that a propagandistic game is failing. I just wish it wasn't Dragon Age: The Veilguard. If it was a new IP and they were injecting it in work propaganda and it would fail, it would be like, oh, okay, well, it's failing. But I wouldn't care as much because it's like, or if it succeeded, I wouldn't care either because it's like if there's a market for those games, if there are people out there who want identity politics to such an insane degree in their video games and they want to play that, great. By all means, more power to you. I really hope that you get more of those games. You know, no problem at all, right? But keep it out of Dragon Age. Okay, let's not have dark fantasy settings. Let's not just uproot existing dark fantasy settings so you can just turn it into a modern political game, right? What are we gonna have next? Leprechauns and pots of gold? Yeah, it would actually probably be a little bit more realistic if we had pots of gold and leprechauns in Dragon Age, right? They haven't done it, and it's not out of the setting. Yeah, so this was my react to Metatron's Dragon Age: The Veilguard is a disaster, and that's the truth. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I think I've made it pretty clear how I feel about this game. This has nothing to do with, like I said, there's representation and then there's bad representation, and this is just bad representation. So I hope that I hope at some point if I start making games in order to try to make it well. I feel that I believe that if you can do representation well, you can make everyone happy. You can make the original gamers happy because they're getting a good game, and you can make the identity politics people happy because they're at least getting some sort of representation, right? So I feel that there could be a balance between these two things. I just don't feel that the modern Triple H games developers are going to be the ones to do that. This was G-Man Gaming and Reviews. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Would love to hear your comments. Would love to hear how I can improve. Thank you for watching.